But here's how I see ego. I see ego as something that when I need it, I can crank it up. Meaning if I'm going to be in some kind of a competition, if I'm going to be in a sporting or other competition, confidence actually helps your performance. So in those situations, I bolster my ego, think about how well I do this, imagine myself winning, those sorts of things. Because functionally, it's very useful to crank up your ego and build up your confidence for some types of tasks. But for so many other things, your ego would just get in the way. So for example, let me give you an example, a concrete example. Years ago, somebody asked me to give a paid speech, and I'd never done that. And I imagined that I would be embarrassed and humiliated and feel really bad taking their money, because they offered a lot of money, for giving a bad performance that would just embarrass me on stage. Now, if I made decisions based on my ego, I would not have accepted that offer, because I'd say, I'm not going to go there and embarrass myself and not be worth the money that they pay me and all that. But I didn't do that. I said to myself on some version of, I'm not my ego. This is just something that could work, might not work. So I went and I did the speech, and it was quite bad. I got to say, it was a bad speech. I wasn't proud of it. To this day, when I think back of it, I cringe a little. I go, ugh. I got paid for that, and I probably should have just handed them back the check. That's how I felt about it. Now, since then, I became one of the best speakers in the country, just in terms of how much money people were willing to give me for it, if you can use that as a standard. But I couldn't have gotten there without going through this phase where I did it poorly. And then, of course, there were speeches along the way that for one reason or another didn't go well, and they were just embarrassing. But I don't feel embarrassment like other people, because I've learned to separate my ego from who I am. Who I am is maybe my DNA, it's maybe my thoughts at the moment, but whatever it is, it's not my ego. My ego is just a thing, it's just a tool. And so I power through things that other people would never approach, because they have a little ego jail they're in. Take what we're doing right now, okay? What I'm doing right now, how many of you could do this without feeling embarrassed? I've literally blown my nose on Periscope. I mean, I've come out here with things in my teeth. I've said stupid stuff. I've gotten facts wrong. I've embarrassed myself in 100 different ways. But do you know how I feel when I think about turning on Periscope? I'm excited. I think, oh, this will be fun. I get to see all these people again and interact, and it's great. If I thought that I was my ego, I wouldn't do this, because it'd be too embarrassing. But I'm not. I'm not my ego. I can do whatever I want. I'm not in any little ego jail. So, that said, you should try to imagine that whatever your ego is, it's either a tool. Well, let me give it to you this way. Your ego is one of two things. It's either a tool that you use, or it's your worst enemy. It's only those two things, right? Because if you don't treat it as a tool, something you can pump up when you need it, something you can pump down when it would just get in the way, if it would just be a problem, pump it down. If you can't do that, if you're not using your ego as a tool, it's your worst enemy. It's the thing that's holding you back. In all likelihood, there may be other things that are holding you back, but your ego is... When I look at people who are... Do you ever see people who are smart, talented, and hardworking, and they still fuck up their life? And you say, what is wrong with these people? Usually, not always, usually if you see somebody who has all the tools, they're smart, they're educated, they've got energy, they're hardworking, they're ambitious, and it still goes wrong, ego. Usually ego. Let's talk about the election. Most of you remember, if you're on this Periscope, you probably were with me from the start. And do you remember When I first came out publicly saying that Trump would win the entire election, imagine doing that if I had anything like a normal ego. All right. Now, I'm pretty sure some people said the opposite. They said, "My God, what an ego you have on you. How in the world could you, come out and say such things? You must think you're magic. You must think you're so smart because you're calling this your mind." It's closer to the opposite, right? You don't do something that is so potentially embarrassing for the rest of your life, right? Keep in mind, had I been wrong about all this Trump stuff, that would have haunted me for the rest of my life, right? And it's not like I didn't know that. Okay, I went into this completely aware that if I'm wrong, I have this giant cloud of humiliation that will follow me forever. Do you know how much I cared about that? Not as much as you'd think. I understood the risk. It's not bravery, really. I don't want to pretend that bravery is really part of the equation. Bravery would be if you imagined your ego was a real thing, like an enemy, and you were going against it. Okay, that would take bravery. I don't have that frame. For me, my ego is simply a tool that I can ratchet up and ratchet down. Had I been wrong about all this Trump stuff and had to live under this cloud of whatever, I would have just said, that's inconvenient. So my ability to survive a gigantic humiliation is just better than most people, because I just don't see my ego or other people's opinion as some statement of who I am.